All right. Come on in, everyone. I got your comments up here. It's Sunday. What is it? 8/21, the year of our Lord 2022. It's me. It's been a minute. Not going to lie. Haven't felt like doing YouTube videos. Really haven't. And if I don't feel like it, then it ain't going to be authentic. So it ain't going to happen. But here I am because I feel like doing it. Already did a Facebook Live today. Did a Locals Live today. I don't know what it is, but I just gotta today. Thanks for joining me, you guys. Come on in. Let's make sure this thing is working. It says restore chat. Oh, there we go. Surrey Case is the first commenter and says good day. Good day to you, sir or ma'am. All right, listen, Dr. Oz. I mean, what's going on there? Oh, you know what? I just realized I set the privacy on this video wrong. Hold on. I got to make it public. Here we go. Public. Hopefully that will help because nobody's here. And I'm like, why? Save. All right. Now we're cooking with mild to moderate propane gas. Okay. Let's wait for some people to come in. In the meantime, let's get some comments. Sandra Trevino. All my supporters know we're here because I posted it across different platforms. Christine H is here. Mazzy Moo has been a member for 3 months. Hello again. Hello to you. I've already done like 3 shows today. What's going on? It's probably my narcissism coming out. I just have to be seen after an 8-day meditation silent retreat where you pretty much don't speak. We'll talk about some of that. Listen, Dr. Oz. So this guy's running. You guys know I have a long history with Dr. Oz. So back in 2010, when I started making videos on YouTube, I was looking at other doctors who were doing public communication, and I saw Dr. Oz because I don't watch TV. And I was like, who is this guy? And the more I watched, the more I was like, oh dear, there's something deeply wrong here. Like so much potential. Cardiothoracic surgeon, Columbia professor, very well esteemed in his field, knighted by Oprah, goes out there and does what so many of us in this space fall prey to, which is audience capture. Realizing, oh, the audience wants to hear this. Ratings go up when I say things like this, like, oh, here's green, Cambodia extract or whatever it is. And when I talk about that, I do really well with the urban or the demographic of middle-aged housewives who are watching the show or whatever it is. And then you give them more of that and you give them more of that. And this kind of internalized capitalism of, hey, wait, that's making money and it's actually giving me influence. And every single one of us who does videos on YouTube is influenced by this consciously or unconsciously. And if you are influenced by it unconsciously and you don't know about it, you're not aware of it, well, then it's running you, like most of our behaviors in life. They're completely unconscious conditioning because we're stuck up in this thought matrix, which I'm going to talk about. So Dr. Oz, it was pretty clear early on, very smart guy, has a lot of potential to do so much good in the world and occasionally does. But then, like anything from an alt-middle standpoint, everything is true but partial. And when he's kind of true, you're like, wow. And then the partial side of it, So it was clear that, this guy was, it felt like, can't read his mind, but motivated at least consciously or unconsciously by fame, influence, power, money, those kind of things that network TV will give you and now social media will give you, and was giving people what they wanted. And then it kind of comes to a head when he has to testify in front of Congress. And, it's clear that he's just going to say whatever it takes to continue doing what he's doing. Well, it's been clear for a while he wants to be president. And one of the stepping stones to that is to take a political stance and to start down the path. And the path for him was, well, where can I get elected? Well, I can't get elected in my home state of New Jersey. So let me see if I can use my in-laws' property in Pennsylvania to establish domicile in Pennsylvania and then run for Pennsylvania Senate. Well, he wins the primary because Trump endorses him. Otherwise, he was trailing behind more competent candidates. And now he's running against, Fetterman, I think his name is. And I don't know much about that guy, and I don't really care. What I care about is, should should a guy like Dr. Oz be elected to the Senate because he has all the name recognition, he has this sort of Pareto distribution of like he was there, he has the fame and the influence already, the name recognition. What would he do in the Senate, right? Now, here's a smart guy, but it's clear that he's got an interest only for this, like this, expanding influence, reach, and all of that. And that's just, I mean, again, you can't read his mind, but so, and as someone who's kind of in the communication space, this stuff is so seductive. The influence and the reach and the clicks and the money. I mean, Oz reported that he's worth somewhere between 100 to 400 million. I'm not sure how you can't nail it down a little more precisely. I suspect it's more towards the higher end. So he's made a lot of money doing what he does, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with making money. But the idea being, how are you making that money? And if it's misleading people about health, then that's problematic. So that's my ultimate beef with Oz, right? I don't know anything about him as a person. I don't know any of that stuff. I don't know his family. I'm sure they're wonderful people. But I do know that I think as it is in politics, most of our politicians are total pieces of crap in terms of their behavior, in terms of the motivation, in terms of their unconsciousness, the fact that they aren't aware of why they're doing what they do. And that makes it really dangerous. And I'd say they're not alone. The vast majority of humans are like this. And, I have to struggle every single day to make what's unconscious conscious, to bring it into awareness so that I can see, oh, is this like the wisest way to be? Am I just a slave to my unconscious conditioning, or am I now response-able? Do I have a little, oh, that's what's happening. Okay, well, I don't need to behave in a way that's completely beholden to that. I can actually do something different, or nothing at all, or just be present, right? Let me get your comments here. There we go. Lisa Goodman, amen to that. Sandra Trevino, my fave was your latest April Fool prank video where you're on the phone to Dr. Oz. Yeah, I mean, and that kind of showed my frustration. It was meant to be entertaining and fool people, and it did. I don't know if it was entertaining. But, again, listen, politics, American democracy is so fundamentally off kilter because it rewards people like Dr. Oz, who are completely behaving in this very unconscious way, and for reasons that aren't really there are going to help the vast majority of people. And I do wonder if democracy needs an entire rethink, a complete reboot. And as we're more divided because of social media, cable news, this weaponization of AI algorithms that really prey on our lower brainstem functions and the lower angels of our nature and put us against each other. And now it's happening at a nation state scale where, the Russians have no idea why we are so perplexed by their invasion of Ukraine. And the West is has no idea how Russia can behave in such a barbaric way and still go party in Europe, on vacation and have a clear conscience. Well, they're seeing totally different worlds, totally different worldviews, and they're separated. There's no corpus callosum fibers in the brain tying the left and right hemisphere together anymore. It's pure separation, which means demonization, which means something stupid can happen. Because when you demonize another group of people as completely evil, all good or all bad or whatever, you can do stupid things like, I don't know, nuclear war, which would be an existential threat. So this stuff actually matters. Bringing the unconscious into consciousness, actually seeing things as true but partial, this alt-middle sort of viewpoint, integral viewpoint, is actually an existential requirement for humanity, in my opinion, as is waking up to what we actually are. We think we are, that this conventional reality that we experience every day, this gross reality is reality. So I have a little secret to tell you. That's not a secret. It's been staring at you since you were a kid. It's not reality. It's a series of conceptual overlays made out of the substance of thought that we call consciousness. And it's a virtual reality that we construct by consensus. And we reinforce it when we talk to each other, when we go on social media, when we go and have conversations, when we go to school, when our parents condition us, when we're walking down the street and we're seeing people behave a certain way, that consensus thought-based reality, which is here's raw reality, thought then creates, spins up an interface that we think is absolutely real. Hoffman and others have talked about this in different terms, but you can actually experience this in meditation or on a silent retreat where you take away the complicity with other humans. You're no longer talking to other humans and reifying, making real this fake world that we create together. And instead you experience raw reality. And that experiencing starts with seeing through the illusion that we are a separate self that's a real thing, some kind of self living in here pulling the strings, that then this world is happening too. Once that self starts to be seen through, or seen for what it is, it's another appearance in thought. It's all a series of thoughts and beliefs, which are thoughts. The thought matrix then starts to collapse. You see through it. And you start to realize, oh, time is part of the thought matrix. And here and there is part of the thought matrix. And outside and inside is part of it's just a construction. So what's left when that relaxes? I tell you, but I'd have to kill you. That's the truth that people are seeking. It's right in front of your eyes right now. It's never not been there. But one of our 6 senses, and by 6 I mean sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. Sight, sound, touch also sensations, emotions, etc., physical sensations, right? Smell, etc., hearing. The 6th sense that we can perceive is consciousness. And when I say consciousness, I'm being very specific here. I mean thought consciousness, sort of that sense of awakeness that thoughts arise out of and dissolve back into. And when you actually pay attention to thought, when you meditate on thought, or when you're actually watching thought, you can see, where does thought come from? It comes from nowhere and it goes back into nowhere. But that nowhere is not nowhere. That nowhere is an awake presence. That when you stop, when you really become, for lack of a better word, you're not doing anything. When it's apparent that you're becoming more present, what is that presence? What is that awake knowing of this moment? That's consciousness. And from that consciousness springs all these thoughts. Consciousness is like a pool of water, a clear pool that vibrates with waves. And the waves are thought structures that can get increasingly complex because each wave creates other waves. It's like a house of mirrors. So you start with the raw senses of sight, sound, touch, or feeling, taste, smell. And from those, this pool of consciousness, that 6th sense, reflects those senses into slightly different patterns that are actually the overlays on the raw sense data that then create, instead of what is the raw sound of a bird singing, that just raw sensation, which it's very hard to perceive when it's clouded with all the thought overlays, we get this thought construction of, oh, blue jay making a racket. That's the perception, right? But what's the raw sense data? Raw sound just happening. So consciousness is this kind of reflective capacity that humans have that then generate internal reflections of auditory stuff like thought, which is little word fragments or images or little bits of concept. And it overlays on the sense data in such a rapid way that you don't even know it's happening. That's the matrix. That's the matrix that we call the conventional world, that we call reality. And we share it because, first of all, there's no separation, really. That's a thought. But second of all, our interaction with other humans actually further solidify thought going to thought going to thought, this matrix-like reality. And so what happens in a meditation retreat? Well, you're no longer talking. You're going in. You're experiencing senses in an increasingly raw and present way. And you're seeing thought for what it is. You're disidentifying. Instead of attention being so present in consciousness and thought that you think you are thought. I mean, when you're lost in thought, you are truly lost. That's what you are. You are thought. So when that relaxes and you can actually see thought as yet another vivid, immediate sense phenomena, well, you have a bit of an identity crisis, don't you? You kind of go, well, who am I then? I thought I was this belief-based creature going through space and time that has this story, this history, and this future, and was born to these parents and so on. But once you really experientially know that everything I just said was a thought, and you experientially realize, that's why they call it spiritual realization. You actually experientially know, not through thought, through experience, that there's only this moment and what is apparently happening in this moment right now. And when that becomes really clear, that there's only this, you try to find where you are in that, this entity you called you. And when you ask the question, a question as simple as, what am I? And then you look in now, you look in this for the answer. What is this thing I'm calling I? Even I'm calling it. What is I? And you look, well, something really interesting can happen, apparently. So anyways, Janice says we're all figments of our imaginations. We are. This is all imagination, meaning it's all thought. Now there's there's truth underneath this. So I'm not saying this is all just complete illusion. I'm saying what we think is gross reality is in fact construction of thought. It's a matrix. But underneath the matrix is a living truth of this moment, what's actually happening. And you can't think about that. You can't imagine that, because then you're constructing this world again. But you can be that. You can realize that through direct knowing of that, of a direct experience. And that's all the pursuit. That's the whole thing people are looking for. And it's right here, right now. It's never left. All we do is cover it in the thought matrix. Everything you think you are is a thought. Every belief that you cling to for life or death, I'm a Catholic, I'm a atheist, I'm a scientist, I think everything is consciousness, I think everything is material, all of that is thought. It's all belief. Which means from an alt-middle perspective, how can you die on a hill when all hills are just dust, right? And yet, in the relative conventional consensus world of thought, some hills are better for the flourishing of conscious entities, conscious beings within that matrix. So you don't reject the relative world, but you see that the relative world and living truth, what's actually underneath it, are actually not two things either, because this is all still a manifestation of that same living truth. And the term living truth can sound a little spooky. It's just what is. It's just this. There's only just one truth underneath it all. and this is not something you can believe or conceptualize. You can experience it. Darlene Griffin says, I think, therefore I am. Thought is what we think we are. I think, therefore I am. The idea I am is a thought. The sense of I am, when you look for it, where is the sense of I am? I feel like I'm something. Like I am, without any qualifier. What is that? Look for that in your experience right now. I am. You know you are, right? You know you aren't an illusion. In other words, you're having an experience. There's an experience happening. The sense of I am. when you really feel what that is, and you drop into an as that, I amness, that's pure unbound consciousness. That's your sixth sense. And step one, the kind of first awakening that people can have, is a de-identifying. So you're no longer identified with body and thought and belief. You're now identified with I am, with pure consciousness. And that means your identity is now this boundless, inclusive, open kind of awareness. And that's wonderful. That's like a huge relief, because what you thought you were, this separate little thing, is now this just infinite knowing quality. And that's first awakening. But what even happens after that? What are further realizations? And it gets even more interesting, because even consciousness, even the sense of I am, is thought stuff. So what's the raw? So now you've taken your identity from I'm thought, I'm a body, and you've shifted it. It's relaxed through the grace of awakening to be something much more vast. But even that's an identity, right? I am that. I am this consciousness, the I am sense. Still the stuff of reflective awareness of thought. But what is that reflecting? What's the underlying living truth, the source code? And that's so beyond the mind's reflective capacity that it can only be realized experientially. And that's the further pursuit of realization, even after first awakening. And there's even the paradigm of identity drops away, and it's just radiant, living reality happening to no one perfectly. And there's no separation, because there's only that. How can you push and pull? How can you like or dislike an aspect of reality when there's only that? There's no stance you can take outside of it to push and pull on it. It's perfect. Yeah, it gets weird. Jason A look in the mirror, see the true boundless true self that you are with your whole being. When you look in the mirror, or when you look at another human, what do you see? What do most of us see when we look in the mirror? What do most of us see when we see our spouse or our daughter or our friend or our enemy? What do we see? Well, we're certainly not seeing what's there. What we're seeing is the thought construction of what's there. We've already, before we even know it, thought has reflected infinitely on the raw data and has said, human being of this proportions, with this history, with this overlay, I have these expectations of that human that I project onto that human, and this and that and the other thing. And that goes for ourselves when we look in the mirror. Oh, there's that bald piece of shit again. Yeah. I wish he was taller, or I wish he was smarter, or I wish he was richer, or I wish he was more influential, or I wish, and all the desires for that character, belief, thought, overlay, concept, consciousness vibrating and reflecting. But what's actually there? When you really look without the concept, and that concept relaxes, and you look from a place of pure being, you see much more clearly. That's all I can say. And again, it's not like I have these answers. I'm struggling along this path with you guys. Occasionally, it appears there's clarity. And occasionally, I'm so mind identified as to be worse than when I started. Because never, as my friend Angelo says, never underestimate the forces of delusion, the ego and the thought structures, the thought matrix. When it's threatened, when it sees that, oh, we're going to be seen through. And again, I'm personifying it a little. It's not a person. It's just a pattern. It's just a process, but it's designed to perpetuate itself through evolution. It's just the thought matrix continues. Like that's its prime directive is keep going, keep going, keep going. Well, when it starts to feel threatened in that way, it comes back with a vengeance. It is angry. It is reactive. And because you've relaxed some of that structure, all the unconscious material that thought structure has been repressing, because the thoughts tell it themselves that those are dangerous feelings, that they're to be avoided. So you project your attention into thought to get out of this discomfort. That's a fantasy land. And has it ever brought you lasting happiness? What if there was a deep realization available to you that there's only this moment and it's unfolding perfectly, and through that deep knowing, you act spontaneously from the deeper wisdom of the moment, and actually, weirdly, the relative world, the thought matrix, actually starts to look better. You start doing things that are actually beneficial for others and yourself. That's one of the side effects of realization. Jason says ego is all about separation of oneself. Yeah, the ego is, the prime directive of the ego is to, first of all, it's a process of trapping attention into a sense of separation and then perpetuating that and defending that against other separate entities which are perceived. What if all that collapsed into the living truth of this moment, this radiant aliveness that's coming and going out of nothing into nothing, and the underlying fabric of reality is a radiant, empty potential. And what you thought was solid, when you look inside, when you feel into the body and you realize it's just radiant sensation vibrating in and out of absolute nothing that isn't nothing, it becomes impossible to use words to talk about it. And you look for the you in that and you can't find it. It's just that, this moment, perfect. No subject, no object, just this. That is what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. And in the Gospel of Thomas, I think it was, he said, the kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth. It's here, and men do not see it. Why? Because we live in the thought matrix. Green-eyed lady says, groupthink is an unconscious process, 1,000%. I'm talking about being stuck in the thought matrix as an individual, but groupthink is being stuck in a belief and thought matrix that's created, instantiated by groups of humans. All of this is one substance of reality. So we're all deeply interconnected and interdependent. Why wouldn't there be groupthink? Of course there will be groupthink. In fact, you could say an individual is a groupthink because we are made up of a fractal infinity of subminds and unconscious minds all the way down. And then we instantiate these bigger minds when we get in groups, when we go root for our sports team, when we go to church, when we are part of a nation state. That's why human competition between nations is actually a real thing. And it's also quite scary when there's existential technology involved, catastrophic technology like AI or like nuclear weapons, etc. So this stuff is not just like me jacking off about spirituality. This is an existential risk and opportunity for humans. If we are able to wake up, we can save the species and a lot of other species, potentially. Now, does it really matter? You know, I've heard it said that our true nature, the entire universe could blink out of existence. All of consciousness could stop and our true nature would not even notice. It's that fabric of everything, where all these phenomena are coming from. That Nothing touches that. And nuclear holocaust is like, oh, nuclear holocaust, another appearance in that. But I'm pretty sure that most of us who live in the conventional, complicit in generating a thought matrix, would like to see that thought matrix continue in a comfortable way that doesn't involve a nuclear winter or the extinction of 99% of the Earth's species or whatever it is. So they're not two, these things that are happening. The conventional and the absolute realities are not two. Lenka says, I love your ideas, but it's never going to happen on a big enough scale to make a difference in this world. So Lenka, I appreciate where you're coming from. What you just said is a thought. That's a belief. And what I said is a belief, to the extent that I think it will happen. That's a belief. So where can we operate from a place of non-belief? Well, we can stop thinking for a second or try our best and drop right into now. There's just seeing itself, and hearing sound, hearing itself. There's nobody there to hear it. Look into your body. What do you feel? Do you feel a body without the thought body? No, it's just radiant sensation and emptiness. Now, what if more and more humans started to realize these truths? What would be the emergent phenomenon in this moment? Awakening. And once awakening kicks in, it's really hard to consciously do harm to others. So we'll see. My mind, my thought structures are fairly optimistic, but could easily go the other way. Let's see. Jason says, are you familiar with Jiddu Krishnamurti? Yes, I'm familiar with Krishnamurti. Listen, all the spiritual teachers, most of the ones that are really good, are all pointing at the same thing. Jesus was an amazing spiritual teacher, because his life was the teaching, right? Buddha, amazing spiritual teacher. The list goes on and on and on. And then the current day, people like Adyashanti and these are really good spiritual teachers because they're pointing not at belief, they're pointing at the kingdom of heaven here on earth, spread in front of you, and you don't see it. So let's see it. It's not even seeing it. Recognize that it's just this. Every person makes a difference. If you believe it's impossible, then it will be for you. I can have a different experience, Erica Emity. And again, I would go right back to who believes. Who is it that believes? Find that person. One thing it became very clear on this last retreat was that the root of everything, the root of all of our delusion, the root of the conventional thought matrix, the root of suffering, the root of violence, the root of hatred, the root of self-harm and self-rejection is self, identity. Who are you? And guess what? You can't answer that question conceptually. You have to look in your immediate experience for the one who is looking. That's it. And keep looking, keep going back, keep looking. That's all. That's really all you need to do. Whole books have been written on this. Ramana Maharshi wrote a whole book on this. Basically, who are you? In Zen, they come at this a few different ways, like the koan, which is a kind of riddle that disarms the mind. And one of those koans is, what was your original face before your parents were born? Lenka says the root is fear. Yeah, fear as itself, as a raw emotion, is just an energy pattern until the mind labels it and then constructs it through the ego as fear of death, fear of humiliation, fear of abandonment, fear of helplessness. That was something that I confronted quite a bit on this last retreat, sitting in meditation and feeling the fear of helplessness. I don't want to let go. If I let go of the sense of self, what will be there? I'll die. That'll be it. I'll be helpless, you know, and that's a deep primal fear. So what is the fear of helplessness guarding? As Joseph Campbell said, the cave you fear to enter holds your greatest treasure. And others have said, fears are dragons guarding our deepest treasures. So what is the fear of helplessness guarding? Helplessness. What is true helplessness? Look there. Iresu says, I've listened to you many times during this pandemic, and I really do not agree with you. Now I hear you, and maybe. Oh, that actually makes me feel really good. Because if I'm being totally honest, which I try to be as much as I can, I've said this before, this is all I care about. COVID and all that, those are just modulations of the conventional world that we can deal with in worse or better ways, in ways that generate suffering or relieve suffering, and that's important. And I talk about that. But deeply, this is what I care about, seeing through all the illusion at what is living truth. What is this? What are we? Who are you? Because when that happens, all the other problems just kind of seem to be seen for what they are. It's a dream. The thought matrix. Did you transcend your fear of helplessness, Sue Mosley? This is a difficult question because I can only give you conceptual answers, whereas in reality, it was an experience of what happens when you completely let go. And I can just tell you of one experience that I had, and I don't know if I've told this story yet outside of Supporter Tribe. The last day of the retreat, and I'd been experiencing a lot of this feeling of like fear of helplessness and the emotion that comes with that and just allowing it, which means, you know, the retreats, people think retreats are some kind of relaxating fun time. It's brutal because you face all your unconscious shit and it's wonderful. It's like this huge burden is like allowed to float to the surface and just dissolve or just be there. So it was the last day, the last meditation before we broke silence, and that was it. And it was cut short to 20 minutes because someone had to leave early and we wanted to say goodbye and all of that, get on a flight. And I was, for the retreat, it was quite clear that, yeah, identity is this expansive awareness, the sense of I am. And I would just keep asking, what am I? And when you ask the question, you're not looking for a conceptual answer. You're looking in experience for what the answer is. So you're saying, what am I? And then you're looking in experience. Your attention is going to where is this sense of I? Where is the looker? And when that happens, sometimes, and Angelo has great videos on this, Angelo DeLullo, things get very quiet and still. And you experience everything as the pure sense of I am. That's one way of thinking about it, this sense of I before thought. And thoughts calm down. And when that happens, that's when the egoic pattern is presented with true helplessness, because there's no sense of control anymore. There's no thinker. There's no sense of self. It's relaxed. But the egoic mind is operating somewhere in the background. That's what it feels like anyways. And this is what happened to me, and this is not uncommon, according to Angelo. I had a physical sensation that I was going to die. And what that felt like was that sense of pressure and constriction, like everything is closing in, and yet my experience was just this: I am. What am I? And it's dead quiet. And then you can feel in the background of sensation, heart rate going like this, sweat starting to break out, a sense of like contraction of all the muscles, just this closing in sensation, like you're going to die. And that's almost the fear of helplessness manifesting itself physically. And what happens next is something that I can't convey in words. But we'll say this: these are all normal physiologic reactions of the conditioned mind that's a fight or flight survival instinct against seeing actual truth, which is that all of this is an illusion or an appearance in thought or in consciousness. And there's something fundamental to that again has to do with the roots of identity. What am I? Look. Now, in a meditation retreat, you have so much built up concentration energy that when you look, it can feel very different than looking when you're busy or distracted or whatever. You're looking and immediately you're lost in thought. Oh, there's nothing here. Wait, what does it mean, look for the self? What does it mean, who am I? I know who I am. Thought pulling you on. But in a meditation retreat, there's so much stillness that can be cultivated that then that experientially just becomes, it's indescribable. But that's it. Who am I? And look. Don't look to thought. Who am I before thought? What was my original face before my parents were born? Jana, we can go within as often as we want, but if we don't go truly practice what we've experienced, it's all for naught. Never underestimate the forces of delusion. So you can see outside the matrix. You can experience it in awakening. And you get a honeymoon period where everything is that. But then the mind, which has not gone away, all those millennia of human conditioning come back. And then what happens is you now see awakening through the lens of thought and identity and story and consciousness. And now it becomes the story of the one who was awakened and lost it. And now we're living in story mind again. And we're in complicity with other spiritual seekers who are like, yeah, I remember having that experience where I was, there was no I and everything was this and that and presence and that. And then, I lost it. And so now I go to all the retreats and I do all the things. And I've done the ayahuasca and I've done the DMT and I've done the psilocybin journey. And yeah, I get these experiences, but then I lose them. I. Identity. Uproot that misperception of identity. That's it. That's really it, in my opinion. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I just realized I'm not a spiritual teacher. Tag moniker. It's interesting that Aboriginal culture have vision quests and young males are sent into the wild alone. People that have lost everything have an enlightenment. Dissolution of ego, question enlightenment. Very important. Joseph Campbell wrote about this or talked about this in his interview with Bill Moyers on mythology. These Aboriginal cultures that have the vision quest, that it's the loss of everything we thought was real, which is all thought. It's all belief. It's all illusion anyways. When that's let go, the fear of helplessness, well, what's there to be helpless? I'm totally helpless. I'm just naked, right? What is the Garden of Eden? Adam loses, they fall from grace and they start putting on clothes. They feel like they're born naked and they're like, ooh, they suddenly are separate. And so losing all that, becoming naked again, in a sense, that's realization. It's just the naked reality of this moment. Without judgment, without parts, undivided, pristine. Lenka says, it's good to be out of your mind, yet we are taught the opposite. Exactly. We teach our children, first of all, repress emotion. Okay, don't cry. Second of all, think about stuff before you do it, etc. And we're really reifying the thought matrix. So culture and society are an extension of us, and they are as deluded as we are. And so they continue the delusional process in the relative world. Jen Hoff says, I always see J.N. Hoff. I always see the fear of death as the ego screaming, it will not be ignored. Yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like there's a child in there saying, stop, listen to me. That's what my heart was doing. It was amazing, actually. When we were allowed to speak after that session, I couldn't speak. It was... Amen Teeter says, it seems that personality, the outward communication, and the mask of who we want to project that we are can be such a blocker to looking within and incorporating that more into our projection of self. So again, all these are projections of thought, and that's why meditation retreats are silent, the good ones, because the projection then becomes much less easy to do when you can't talk to other people. In fact, you're told you don't have to make eye contact. You don't have to acknowledge other people. Just go about your thing and you can feel their energy, but you don't interact with them. And that is liberating, liberating. The retreat we're doing in November, which is all full, unfortunately, in North Carolina, is going to be fully silent for 5 days. Fully silent, not a word. And I can't wait. At the same time, there's a part of me that's like, well, again, this is ego mind telling stories about this future thing that's going to happen, that's going to bring some realization. It's not, it can't be that. It's now. And there's no someone that it's going to happen to. And when that's realized, that's liberation. That's what everyone seems to be looking for. And yet we're looking in thought for it. We're looking in belief for it. We're looking in story for it. It's not there. It's only here. It's only now. You only wake up now. Green-eyed lady. Today's world is crying out for statesmen who can publicly admit they've experienced an epiphany and changed their minds. Unfortunately, we see only more and more entrenched opinions and doubling down. I agree. You're absolutely right. You know what's funny is this Finnish prime minister, young woman, 36 years old, youngest prime minister they've ever had, got in trouble because some Instagram stories emerged of her partying at a friend's house, dancing on the floor and like doing all that. I don't know what that was, such a white guy dance. Hey guys, they were doing all that. How are you? I'm Z-Dog. I dance. I like to party. Anyways, gets out and like she got shit on by everyone for being, unpremiere-like and so on and so forth. And there was questions of like, were they doing drugs at this party and all this other stuff? And I just couldn't help thinking, she's a 36-year-old being herself at a party. And I don't know, if I had a leader and they were a decent leader, it was clear they weren't crazy, and that came out, I'd be like, awesome, they're a human being. I'd be even more interested if I found out that they had had some awakening or some realization of deeper truth, because then I'd know they're acting from presence and acting from a deeper wisdom than thought-based wisdom, which is not wisdom. It's more delusion. It's useful. It's a useful tool. I don't mean to shit on like science. Like, I love science. I love astrophysics. I love biology. I love medicine. That's all great. That's all in the relative world useful. And again, the relative world and the absolute truth are not two. So that's all fine. But if we think that's all there is, if we don't see the not two-ness of it, that's when wisdom fails and we fall prey to reductionism and all the foolishness that comes with that. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much right. Sue says, I applaud her sense of fun. I kind of like it. I mean, I'm probably missing something that the Finnish people know about their own culture or their own way of being that she's somehow violating. I don't know. But, Eric Weaver, brother Eric, who was at our last retreat. Leadership is influence, and Eric is a leader. Leadership is influence, and influence comes about through authenticity and a willingness to be vulnerable. Agree. And what's more vulnerable than the deep knowing that there's no you to be vulnerable, that we're entirely helpless in the face of what's unfolding, and that's okay. Which means we can say we can recognize when we're thought bound or acting unconsciously, and say it, feel it, know it, and become present, become aware of presence, even though we're always present. You can't not be present. Even when we think we're not present, we're doing that in the present. Eckhart, this is Eckhart Tolle 101, by the way. Charles LePage, who is Jesus? I really like the audiobook Resurrecting Jesus by Adyashanti. You might enjoy it too. How's my video quality, you guys? Just tell me real quick. Is it real glitchy or anything? Because I'm getting all kinds of error messages and I'm trying some new software in OBS, like beta edition. So let me know if it's goofy. Hopefully the replay will be okay. Amen says, I'd argue we most often look up to leaders who do not project much, if any, vulnerability. Absolutely, we do. Why? Because the separate self wants to feel safe. How can it feel safe if the leader actually doesn't project a sense of invulnerability? But when we realize there are no separate selves, that we're all in this one thing, it's all Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, unfiltered reality. It's all that, talking to that. There's nothing to push and pull in. Well, then you just want the radical authenticity of this moment. You want people to be who they are, and hopefully competent at managing the levers of the conventional reality that a statesman or a president would have to do. Joe says it's all about the illusion. It's all about the thought-based world as seen from a false identity of self. And when the false identity of self relaxes, or is seen through, and it's just this, thoughts aren't a problem anymore. illusion isn't a problem anymore because there's nobody that it's happening to. And that sounds weird from the standpoint of the mind and the illusion. But it's not weird from the standpoint of realization. It's just what is true. It's liberation from suffering. Oh my God, Simply Always Awake is here. That's Angelo. How you doing, brother? Video is great. Detail is good. I can even see your non-existent self. Can I tell you guys something? If you don't go subscribe to Simply Always Awake, and you're interested in this, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you're not interested in this, then, well, you do you. And one day it may click and one day it may not, and it doesn't matter. It's fine. All of it's perfect. But Angelo DeLulo, who ran the retreat, points so directly, and his YouTube channel, you'll be like, what is this weird backgrounds? And like, this guy's talking, and then 5 non-existent minutes later, you'll just be like, oh, so go there, check it out. Yeah. And his book, Awake, It's Your Turn, which he's been on the show many times. It's the most direct pointer that I've seen to this. Adyashanti is a close second with Emptiness Dancing, but that's more, it's interesting. That's a little different. It's not as direct a guide like you can do this kind of thing. Angelo's book is that. Like, hey, here's what's possible, and here's all the mind constructions and thought-based things that prevent it from happening, explained clearly by someone who's been through it, who also happens to be a doctor and a pretty funny dude. Jonna says, talking to Charles, Angelo says, hey, nice to see you, Joanne and Lizette. Yeah, we were all at the retreat, at Angelo's prior retreat. Isn't that awesome? Joe's rereading Awake now. That's great. I reread specific chapters multiple times. The Stages of Awakening chapter, I was just going to reread today, Angelo, because this morning when I was meditating, it just struck me that I need to look at that again, because every time I read it, something brand new kind of clicks in the experiential realm, because you can get up in your head about that stuff, or you can, it just is pure experiential pointing. And that's why reading it multiple times, it's different in every present moment, and it hits differently. It's great. It's fucking amazing. Milkfish says, I'm having deja vu. I just saw black Schrodinger's cat walk by. Then it walked by a second time. That's a glitch in the matrix, in the thought matrix. Watch out, because the agents are coming. I've told you guys my whole Matrix, the first Matrix movie, original Matrix movie theory of like what that's all pointing at. And it's probably wrong, but this is how I see it. Neo, in the early part of the movie, has had glimpses of reality. He's seen unfiltered reality in a glimpse. He's had a peak experience. Maybe he's done some drugs, maybe something where he's seen, oh, this is conventional reality, feels unreal. There's something wrong with it, because there's something underneath that feels more real than this, that is more true, that is more more real than this. And he starts to become slightly destabilized. He desperately is seeking what this is. He becomes a hacker. He's trying to figure out what's up. Well, it turns out there's this guru named Morpheus, who's highly realized, who's had awakening and beyond, who notices in Neo that something is shifted. He can feel it energetically. And he then approaches Neo and says, listen, you have a choice now. You can continue to explore this, in which case everything you know about yourself could dissolve. You could die. The person you know, as you know them, will die effectively. Not literally, but effectively. literally meaning in the conventional sense. Your body's not going to drop dead. And you have a choice to continue to live in the conventional without exploring this further, which is fine, but clearly you're suffering. So he never really had a choice, did he? Because he was suffering. So he took the red pill, which is let's keep going down the path to realization. So what happens? He has first awakening. He takes the pill and he wakes up to a reality that was much different and bigger than he thought. Now, in the movie, they popularize it and they make it about, this real world and the, virtual matrix of the computers and so on. And the real world is this desolate desert and so on. But in First Awakening, it's more you realize, oh, I'm actually, this, identity with the sense of I am or unbound consciousness and that kind of thing. And at that point, then he's a little bit destabilized for a while. He's throwing up. He's like what? All of this was not, I thought I was these stories and this history and time bound and all that. And none of that was true. So it becomes very destabilizing. So then what happens? Now he becomes a real spiritual seeker. Now he's like, well, shit, I need to figure out, they're telling me that I'm the one, meaning everything is one. Like there's not even, there's some deeper realization to be found, but I'm just still trying to figure this out because now I'm kind of telling the story of the one who woke up and I'm back in the matrix. He goes back into the VR, puts the goggles back on, as Angelo says, and is fighting through all this stuff. That's the shadow work after awakening. That's allowing all this repressed material to be brought into consciousness and dealt with. And for him, what is that? Well, what do these agents represent? The agents, in my opinion, represent our egoic mind, our thought-based belief structures, the conditioning of millennia of humans. Not just this life, but all our ancestors and everything. All that conditioning manifests as Agent Smith. And guess what? As Morpheus says, the agents guard every door they hold, every key. Everyone who has tried to fight an agent has died. There's so much there, even in that. Because if you go to fight the ego, who is fighting the ego? The ego is fighting the ego. But if you fight the ego and die, if you truly die, true selflessness, then what happens? So these agents are blocking all the doors. They're holding all the keys. They chase him. They torment him. They kill his friends. They basically show him his place. You are a human. You're filthy. You live in this matrix and you'll never get out. There's no end to your suffering. They torture Morpheus. They do all these things. So what ends up happening? Neo continues down the path. He's motivated by love of Trinity, which really is a manifestation of unconditional love. He keeps going. At some point, one of his compatriots says, they watch him in the Matrix and they're like, holy shit, what's going on? And he's moving like the agents, right? Because he understands, he's starting to perceive ego for what it is, thought for what it is, seeing through it. And what do they say? He's starting to believe. But this is not a thought-based belief. This is a deep realization of what is, of what's really underlying all this egoic structure. So then what happens? He still has this sense of self as, oh, I'm this, this is all a matrix. It's not real. It's all consciousness. Fine, fine, fine. But there's still a sense of self in that. So what happens? He runs from Agent Smith. He's running from his ego. His ego is basically right there. There's that heart rate. And his ego shoots him right in the chest. Bam, 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 bam. And right there he dies. Truly dies. Ego death. That's it. Lights out. And there's Trinity representing unconditional love of being of what is. She kisses him. Wake up, Neo, wake up. Get up, Neo, get up. And he opens his eyes, and the agents are still there. He opens his eyes, and there's nowhere, no sense of identity for self to land. He's now everything. He looks out, it's all streaming energy. Those beings he thought were separate, those agents, are just all part of the same streaming energy that he is, and all of it is just happening to no one. And what does he do? He comes running up at Agent Smith and dives right into him because they are not two. It's all one thing. And that's the final liberation. And then that motherfucker can fly. Isn't it amazing? It's amazing. Man, so good. DDK Crew 1 says, Matthew 13:17, many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. Jesus was a fully realized, awakened being, right? And others could not see. Even his own disciples could not see. They did not understand the teaching. Michelle H. says, how do I become a supporter tribe member on YouTube? Just go to my channel, and there'll be a button there, join. So my YouTube channel, and there should be a button that says join, and then you can join. I think it's like a few tiers, like $4.99, $19.99, and $49.99 if you're like a high roller and just love what we do. Yeah, appreciate it. It helps support the show. All right. I've been going for a long time, an hour and 6 minutes. Sorry, Sunday Zen always goes off the rails. That's the whole thing. It's live. I never know what I'm going to talk about. And I don't know. I'm deeply grateful to all the teachers out there who point at this stuff so well. Angelo is at the top of my list. Eckhart Tolle, Adyashanti, people like Locke Kelly, who have very practical ways. Sam Harris, who's curated his Waking Up app that allows people to be exposed to multiple different teachers. It's really, really great. Sam has his own fixations, but we all do. And I think it's very powerful. I think we're at a tipping point now that this stuff is so available that mass awakening events are just going to happen. It's already happening. So, all right, guys. I love you. That's it. I'll fade us to black. What do you say? And we will be out. Share the video. I don't know. Go follow Simply Always Awake on YouTube. Check out Angelo's book, Awake, It's Your Turn. Subscribe to my channel. Join the supporter tribe, all the usual algorithm call to actions. All right. I love you guys. And we are out. Peace.